Hi, greetings everyone. It's what a great feeling to get into week 9. Yeah, for those who have been praying for me, thank you so much. The knee recovery is going quite well. I just got back from my second day of physical therapy today, and I'm getting some good flexibility in it. So yeah, thank you for your continued prayers. This week, preaching on national holidays. First question here: should we focus or center the sermon on the holiday? I kind of go back and forth on the utility of national holidays in our modern society. They seem to serve very different purposes than perhaps their original intention, maybe even from just a few generations ago. Definitely in the summertime, for those holidays around the summertime, they seem more of a chance to grab an extended vacation. And again, nothing wrong with that. Maybe get a longer vacation off of a 3-day weekend. And for those who happen to stay in town and actually make it to service, I think it's a great opportunity to incorporate and acknowledge the holiday, but I'm not a proponent of centering the service around the holiday. But for those who do choose to, and I would probably make a nod to it or use the occasion to link the ideals, if you will, of a given holiday or a given celebration with the higher ideals, ideals that transcend politics or nationalism. It's a good opportunity to speak on charity, compassion, kindness, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, all the fruits of the Spirit. I think there's probably a way to link any of those into any occasion, Veterans Day, Memorial Day, looking at faithfulness, self-control, self-sacrifice, loving another. Right? I think that there's always an opportunity to look for a higher ideal in the holiday, even if it's not necessarily realized. And to that extent, yeah, I wouldn't shy away from being critical of the shortcomings of certain holidays. As of recent times, Columbus Day being one of those that doesn't sit well with indigenous folks, for example. So yeah, it's an opportunity to find opportunities to point to the good news. Um, Maybe seeing a country's prosperity as a call to share in that prosperity with others, to whom much is given or to whom much is earned, much is entrusted, much is expected. Um, I think it's an opportunity for prayers for blessing and healing. The holiday is an opportunity to affirm those and remind those that the world is filled with a vast diversity that reflects God's diversity and God's creative diversity. And I believe, this is, as Professor Tweitman observed, Christian theological reflection extends out across time, across generations, and across the global community. So this is an opportunity to even place those holidays in the context of larger global issues. And again, I think it's very important to acknowledge and owning one's theological starting points, particularly if you're going to be preaching in corporate events. Or I tend to operate more in the chaplain rather than the pastoral realm in many ways. So for me, I'm often called to do prayers at breakfasts or corporate retreats, things like this. And so keeping, my theological starting point up front has been very important. Especially as some of the corporate events I have interreligious, not just interfaith, but interreligious participants. So some of the challenges I perceive, I think Dr. Professor Treitman did a fantastic job of outlining some of the inherent dangers, particularly around nationalistic pride, mixing nationalistic pride with spiritual pride. There's a grand opportunity of missing the mark by misrepresenting Scripture, drawing the church and clergy more into a compromising position with regards to favoring political positions. I think that's always a danger, placing so much emphasis on the holiday that the worship service blurs into what would be an unrecognizable gospel. Also, again, Professor Tweitman suggested this, that it's also an opportunity to alienate those, particularly if you have a larger congregation, just don't know who might be in the pews on any given Sunday. And anytime you start mixing nationalism with Christianity or a spiritual message, then I think you really open up this door to just completely shut people down. I oftentimes will bring my guest who may be of completely other faiths. If they're staying with me, I don't stop being who I am, and so I'll invite them to come with me on Sunday services, and more than one occasion, folks have came, and I would hate for them to get a message that was off the mark, if you will, or worse, downright hurtful. Yeah, and there is a very real danger in contributing to nationalistic fervor that way. In my opinion, it's a not so subtle form of idolatry of mammon. Not necessarily all about money, but about the self-serving enculturation of people, territory, resources, staking a claim or manifest destiny of some sort to ecological or economical or even anthropological resources, as if we've had some sort of favored status from God. I think in history time and again has proven how horrific that line of thinking will result in. Some spots of disagreement in the not from Dr. Troutman. Actually, Dr. Troutman's spot on. But the first podcast that I listened to, let's see which one was this, on patriotic holidays and church services. So the commentators called attention, and so first of all, full disclaimer, theological disclaimer, coming from a non-denominational Protestant, deeply military heritage. I have to confess that I bristled at a segment of their podcast where the commentators called attention to some of the dynamics of military service and the nation's tendency to declare or label all who have served as heroes, first responders included. Full confession, when a lot of us veterans hear the words, "Thank you for the service," a subtext that kind of plays in our mind is, "Thank you for your service so I didn't have to." And there was something about the way they handled the topic that I really bristled. They provided disclaimers they didn't mean to denigrate, but yet short quips and short-handed approaches like this devalues our veterans, and it's a very real impact on the U.S. military machine, on the lives and the lives of the family members who sacrifice more than most. At the bidding of the U.S. military and political machine. Military sacrifice mostly does not benefit those veterans. We oftentimes forget that the greatest beneficiaries of military service are the corporate and political elites. Everyone who is so global commerce exists, if you will, because of free. We see this, for example, today in the Red Sea, and the sacrifices people are making to keep commerce flowing in the Red Sea. That benefits more than the U.S., by the way. That's a pricing issue, and you don't have to take my word for that. You can turn on Bloomberg or any other news in the recent weeks that's talked about that, and you'll see that primarily this is a commerce issue. And so for no one who's ever served, the benefits are at the expense of those who do serve. And so in some sense, everyone that serves is a hero. There is some interesting points to consider in their post 9/11 critique, but what happens is we start to minimize the extensive trauma that's inflicted on military members when we start talking like that. As an example, right, personal example, I grew up a stepchild of a Vietnam veteran war hero, and I also served for 8 years, and I carried 17 years of Vietnam era trauma, including violent physical abuse, exposures to suicide, addictions, anger issues, and all manner of other complicated trauma, long before I enlisted in 1987. People are injured every day in the service, and not everybody's, and some are killed. And that's rarely in combat zones, right? So just last week there was a few Marines lost their life, I believe, in Southern California. Just a few weeks back, nothing to do with combat zone. So the U.S. military, it's an all-voluntary force, for sure, but no one gets to choose whether they go into a combat zone. Again, that's a political decision along with their general military advisors who make those decisions. Nobody I served with ever wanted to be some war hero. So forgive me for getting a little spun up on this, but it's a very delicate subject that demands deep, holistic, and systemic thinking. Those combat veterans who are injured in combat would be the first to tell you that even the family members and the support folks who weren't in the foxhole with them are very much heroes that they depended on for their life while they were in a godforsaken place. Okay, so rant over. It's probably most useful for chaplains to celebrate the ideals of a given holiday. For example, on Veterans Day, to preach, on selfless sacrifice, community devotion, willingness to lay down one's life for others. There's a massive lane to move to the gospel when we approach, for example, Veterans Day in that way. At the same time, pastors can also call out the realities that many military members are facing, not for nationalistic reasons, but they join to escape poverty, to fund their education, to find their calling or place in society, or simply following, as in my case, the path of their family heritage. The service is expected of me, service is expected of others. And so, pastors can point to the reality and the massive economic divide that exists between those who benefit commercially from the military service and the near poverty that military service members live in. And in many ways, look to the demographics, do the research. You'll find there's oftentimes outsized proportions of people from poor communities that do go in and serve in the military relative to the general population. And in fact, I think it's less than 1%, maybe even less than 0.5% of the population that ever even serves. So, I have witnessed some good examples, not so many of the bad examples, but the good examples come from, ironically, military chaplains. They're probably some of the best that I've seen in giving holiday and cultural observance sermons, because they carry as a part of their job description a commitment to interfaith and interreligious support, if you will. It's on that chaplain's job description to facilitate, if you will, the faith pursuits of others. And so most of the chaplains that I've been around and I've experienced sermons with, they go out of their way to point to some of these ideals in their sermons. And also they're well schooled in the historical significance, if you will, and the shortcomings of any given holiday. So just a few of my thoughts this week. I look forward to hearing all of your response in the forum. Hope you all have a fantastic week.